Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for your blessings. We thank you for this time that we have been able to spend together and the things that we can learn. And we thank you that you are so good. And as we continue to explore different areas, different issues, we just ask for your Holy Spirit to be here with us, for you to guide and lead, to teach us, to open our eyes to that which we need to see, to turn us upside down so that we're right side up, and that we might know the truth, and the truth might set us free. This we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so we're going to be looking at escaping the bitterness trap. So we're going to be looking at bitterness, and where does bitterness come from? What is it? What really is going on when somebody has bitterness? And this is an important topic because many of the individuals that I've taken care of that have been ill, bitterness is a significant component of their illness, and in fact a driving factor in many illnesses. Now, we are told that we should pursue peace with all people and holiness, without which no one will see the Lord, looking carefully lest anyone fall short of the grace of God, lest any what? Yeah, any root of bitterness springing up cause trouble, and by this many become defiled. So we see that bitterness can do a work, and it can do a work that is not so good, right? And it's kind of like roots. It can spread out quite a ways, and it can defile many in that bitterness. We are told in Ephesians 4:31 and 32, let all bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice, and be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God in Christ forgave you. So this is the admonition, and one thing that has helped me out a lot when it comes to reading the Bible, and especially in a way that helps you to be free, is to recognize that every command, like it says, let all bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice. And guess what, guys? Be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another. And it's like, okay, well, that's nice, but what if I blow up at them? And what if I don't like them? And what if, forgive them, even as God in Christ forgave you. Really? I'm not sure I want to go to the cross and do that for somebody else. Right? I'm just not there. Well, everything that the Word of God asks you to do, it promises whatever is necessary in order to do it. Right? So behind every command in the Word of God is a promise of whatever is necessary in order for that to be fulfilled. Right? So you can look at every command in the Bible as a promise. So you can say, okay, well, when it says, let all bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, and evil speaking be put away from you, that means that God, when you trust in Him, will give you what is necessary in order for you to let all bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice. And it says, be kind to one another, so God will give you what is necessary so that you can be kind to one another. Tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God in Christ forgave you. Right? So it's a promise. Not just a command, but it's a promise that's there. Now, let's seek to understand what this bitterness is. Bitterness relates to justice. Bitterness and justice are related to each other. How? Well, justice, when it comes to true justice from God and its relationship to sin, we recognize that, well, God is God, right? There's no other God. And Psalm 86 and verse 10, for you are great and do wondrous things, you alone are God. And so God alone is God, and we recognize that God is just. But God is not just for His sake. Now, He's just because that's who He is. That's what He's like. That's His character. But His justice is for others, because He has selfless love. Everything that He does is motivated for others. And so His justice is for others' sake. And Deuteronomy 32 and verse 4, all his ways are justice, a God of truth, and without injustice, righteous and upright is he. So he's a just God. And when it comes to sin, sin is against God, it's against his law. Because, well, it says, and David said truly in Psalm 51 and verse 4, this is inspired, right? Against you, you only have I sinned and done this evil in your sight. Now, who else was involved in this episode of David's life? Bathsheba, Uriah, Joab, and the army. That's right. So, but he said, against you, you only have I sinned and done this evil in your sight. Well, you can trespass against others for sure, and they can be hurt and so on by what you say and by what you do, and they can, especially physically, and they can take personally what you say and what you do. But sin, ultimately, as we're told in 1 John 3 and verse 4, sin is the transgression of the law. Now, do you have a law?
Sure.
Okay.
Law of sin and death. Principles we live by.
All right.
Law of Christ Jesus.
So, let me ask it this way. Do you have a law that you have made that others must abide by?
No.
Yes.
If you do, then you are God. And there's the problem, right? But God is the one who has the law, and when his law is broken or transgressed, then that is sin. So sin is always against God. Sin is always against God's law. And sin requires a penalty. It does, which is death. And we're told that in Romans 6:23, for the wages of sin is death. Right? The wages of sin is death. Praise the Lord. That verse goes on to say, but the gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord. Right? So the wages of sin is death, and God is the one who must uphold his law and administer or exact the penalty, because he is the one who has sinned against. We're told in Romans 12 and verse 19, vengeance is mine. I will repay, says the Lord. And when that penalty is paid in full, then justice is satisfied. Then it is complete. So, what does that have anything to do with bitterness? Well, in bitterness, I believe that I'm God. Again, this is the foundation of all the issues that we run into, is this identity crisis, I'm God. So since I'm God, then what you did to me. You did it to me. Right? You violated my law. Right? And that sin requires a penalty. And I must uphold justice, but my justice is not selfless. My justice is selfish. That's right. My justice is selfish. So it's for me, right, that I exert that justice. And I'm going to try to get the penalty from you, and only when you have paid that penalty in full am I going to set you free. Until then, you're not going free. Until then, you're not going free. That is the basis of bitterness. I think I'm God. I think you've done what you've done to me. You have transgressed my law, and now you owe me. I'm the one that's going to, or needs to, extract the penalty from you, and until I do so sufficiently, you're not going free. That's bitterness. Now, let's look at it from the deception standpoint.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead. So, in a slightly different analogy, you look at the bitterness prison. So, you did me wrong. So, in response to that, I'm going to put you in prison. I'm throwing you behind the bars. And you're going to stay in that prison until you pay for all of what you did. But you can't pay. You know, how much good behavior annuls bad behavior? Like, does the fact that I haven't killed anybody for the last 15 years take away the fact that I killed somebody 15 years ago? No. Right? Good behavior after bad behavior does not atone for bad behavior. Right? There's still a penalty that's required for that. So somebody can't just undo what they did, and they can't undo the effects of what they did. Remember the ripples go, and you can't get them back. Right? And so what somebody else did, they cannot pay for, and if they have to pay for it in order to get out of prison, they're never getting out of prison. They're stuck. Right? That's it. What's the reality? The reality is, well, you wronged God because, well, even if you did it to me, it's done to God. Have you ever known anybody that had their car keyed? Yeah? Yeah? Somebody comes along and they're down the side of the vehicle. Now you got this big scrape all on the paint and everything like that. Well, yes, that keying was done to the car. Sure. But was it about the car? Yeah. Well, it wasn't about the car. It was, first of all, about the one who had the key and did it to the car, right? Because it wouldn't have happened to the car if the person who had it in them didn't get it and do it, right? So it really has to do with the one who keyed the car. But if they keyed the car, were they frustrated at the car? No. They're usually frustrated at the owner. Right? And so that is an attempt to get at the owner, not at the car. They care less about the car. And if the owner sold the car and now it belonged to somebody else, they wouldn't bother keying it.
True.
Right?
True.
So it's not about the car, it's about the one who does it, and it's about the owner. So who is it that's the instigator of sin? Satan. And who is he after?
God.
God.
God, yeah.
They're not after us. Right? He could care less about it. Well, I mean, you know, he could use us. As far as he can use us, that's as far as he cares about us. But that's it. He's after God. And he knows that the only way he can make God hurt is to hurt his children. Because he can't get at God directly. But God feels everything his children go through. Everything. Nobody ever suffers close to what God suffers because of sin. Because he feels it all. So, it's really, when somebody does something to you, it's really not about you. It came out of them because that's what was in them. And it's really about the owner, who is God. So, what you did to God. And I'm the one that's in prison. Right? I'm looking through the prison bars thinking you're inside, but the problem is I'm the one that's inside. It's a backwards perspective, right? And I'm going to stay in prison until you pay for all that you did that I think you did to me. And you're not going to be able to pay, so therefore, I'm not going to be able to get out of prison. You're not stuck in prison. I am. By the bitterness. I become my own jailer, my own prison warden, right? In bitterness. It's crazy. It really is. And in order to go free, I must be willing to let you go free. That's the only way I can go free, is to let you go free. But I'm not going to do that, because if I do, then my sense of justice is not going to be met. You're going to get away with it. So for the sake of my sense of justice, I'm going to hold on and not let you go. What's the key to getting out of that prison? Okay. Forgiveness. That's right. So forgiveness is the key that can get out of that prison, and guess what? You can stand there holding the key, even as you remain captive in that cell, because the key will never get you out unless you use it. Unless you use it. And I'm not going to use the key, because if I do, I'm afraid you're going free.
That's a vicious circle, isn't
Yeah. Yeah, vicious circle. Absolutely. And so how am I going to make you pay? Well, you only pay by pain, because you caused me pain, so you gotta pay by pain as well. So how am I going to make you have pain when I'm the one who has pain? Well, I'm going to hold on to the pain. And I'm going to smolder with the pain. And I'm going to, oh man, and if I can only just,
Victim.
yeah, and now if I can hold you close enough, now maybe you can hurt while I'm hurting.
Now
With
we're
the
both
pain.
hurting.
Yeah. But who gets hurt worse by the fire? The one that's beside it or the one that's in it?
The fire.
The one that's in it, right? So who's the one that's getting burned up by this?
What?
It's me. It's me. That's right. So I'm going to hold on to those hurt feelings until you suffer enough to pay for your sin. But no measure of suffering can undo what happened in the past. And so therefore, I'm going to remain captive. I'm going to hold on to the hurt feelings. I'm going to smolder with them. And I'm just going to continue that way, apparently forever. And if I let go of those hurt feelings, then there's nothing that I can do to make you pay. And you're going to get away with it. Justice won't be met. So for the sake of justice, I hold on to the hurt. Yeah, it's counterproductive. Exactly. It'll kill you. It does kill you. That's the foundation of bitterness. It's crazy. It really is crazy. Now, there is a deception of forgiveness. There's a deception of forgiveness. And this is the usual understanding of forgiveness in the Christian world. And that is, this deception of forgiveness is, well, you sinned against me, and you owe me for what you did. So you did it to me, and you owe me for what you did, but I'm not going to make you pay for what you did. I'm going to let you go free.
Thank you, Jesus.
Oh, praise the Lord, hallelujah. So I'm going to forgive you. Right. Now, that's a deception. Yes.
Isn't that like putting hot bricks on their head?
Putting a brick. Yeah, well, that could be. You could be doing it to, well, like someone else said, put coals in their,
Yeah.
in their hair, heaping coals, burning coals on their head. That smolder a little while, burn them a little bit, make them feel kind of bad. Right. So, what's the problem with this forgiveness? I mean, this is what we usually think of as forgiveness. But what's the problem with this forgiveness?
Well, it's not deep enough. It's
Self-centered.
superficial.
Yeah, well, yes, it's superficial.
You're making yourself God,
Uh-huh.
and you didn't make the rule to begin with. And nobody can forgive sin but God.
All right. So you're making yourself God. You're not it's not your rule that was broken, and so you're making yourself God. That's right. The problem is, I'm still God. This forgiveness comes from a perspective that I am still God. Is that going to work? No, it won't work. So you can go through the round of forgiving somebody and forgiving somebody and forgiving somebody and forgiving somebody from this standpoint, and you will still suffer with bitterness. Because you're not God, and you can't do this. So what is forgiveness, really? The reality of forgiveness is that in doing what you did to me, you sinned against God. It was not me or my law that you broke. It was Him and His law. And I came to the cross, like we talked about yesterday, and I accepted that divine exchange on my behalf, and Jesus has taken my place. Now it is no longer me that it was done to, because now I have Jesus' past, I have his history, he took mine. There is nothing for me to be bitter with you about, because it's not me anymore. It's not me anymore. You don't owe me anything. Your debt is with God. And the same one who set me free at the cross is the same one that can set you free at the cross too. The same way and as freely as he set me free. And because of what Jesus did, then I love you and I want to help you to come to freedom at the cross just like I found freedom at the cross. Bitterness is never resolved with the other person. It's never resolved with the other person.
We try to make it that way when it's about us.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Yes. So when we're gone and we think it's about us, then we have to go to the other person and extract an apology and make the, and all of this kind of stuff and so on and so forth. Then we feel good because, when you're gone, it feels good to be acknowledged and told that you were right and they were wrong and, and other things of that nature. I don't mean when you're God. I mean when you're God. Right? Selfishness. God doesn't, he doesn't think that way. So bitterness is never resolved with the other person. Bitterness is always resolved at the cross. And it's resolved before they ever acknowledge that they did anything wrong. It's resolved before they apologize. It's resolved before any of that kind of stuff. You don't need them to apologize. You don't need them to acknowledge they're wrong as far as you're concerned because you're free. But can they go free until when they don't recognize that they've done wrong? Can they go free having done wrong but still holding on to it and refusing to believe that it's wrong? Well, no. So for their sake, yes, we would want them to acknowledge and to, and to be free. But I don't need their acknowledgement for me to be free. But we desire that acknowledgement from them so they can be free. My freedom comes at the cross. Their freedom does too. Bitterness is always and only resolved at the cross. And I think we covered that already. So, how do I know that the bitterness is resolved? Well, again, I still remember what happened, but there's no more pain with the memory. That's a big key. You don't forget what happened. You don't forget what other people said and did and so on and so forth. But the pain with the memory goes. Because God heals the hurt, right, in the process of that forgiveness. And now the recollections are not painful, and the recollections are now painted with the forgiveness and the love of God in the midst of the situation. So now, instead of just seeing the bitter, painful elements associated with it, you see the love of God and his forgiveness in the midst of all of it as well. All right. What about overcoming negative thoughts? Anybody ever struggled with negative thoughts? All right.
Yeah.
All right. I'm not alone. Yeah. Yes, my life was very much encompassed with negative thoughts, very oppressive negative thoughts, intrusive negative thoughts, very dark negative thoughts. And there was a period in my life where I didn't know I could go a minute without having these negative thoughts just always running through my head. And when you think negative thoughts, at the beginning they kind of whisper at you, and after a time they kind of talk at you, and after time they start screaming at you. They just get louder and louder over time. It's harder and harder to ignore them, harder to push them away, harder to find freedom from those thoughts. And that was my experience. So how does one overcome negative thoughts? Well, first, we need to recognize that thoughts are based upon information. And information either is truth, which comes from God, He's the origin of truth, or it's lies, which comes from the enemy. And the enemy also is very good at taking the truth and mixing it with lies. And so that can be the enemy too. So if it's got some truth and some lies with it, well, that comes from the enemy as well. And I have the privilege of evaluating every thought and evaluating it by a standard. Now, God created us so that we would evaluate every thought by what standard? By His law. That's right. By the Word, right? And when that's our evaluation, then we can evaluate the thoughts compared to the Word to discern whether this is a God thought or whether this is not a God thought. Paul talks about this. Hebrews 4 and verse 12 says, "For the word of God is living and powerful and sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing even to the division of soul and spirit and of joints and marrow, and is a discerner of the thoughts and the intents of the heart." So if you want to know where the thoughts are coming from, you want to know where the motivations are coming from, get to know this, the Word of God. Because it will help you to discern where is that coming from. Now, at the beginning, let's learn about how to fail at overcoming negative thoughts. I don't know if you teach music and then you teach people how to fail at singing and fail at playing piano or other things of that nature. Probably not. But we're going to start by learning how to fail at overcoming negative thoughts. Ready? All right. Try not to think about the negative thoughts. There you go. Yeah. That's how you fail at overcoming negative thoughts. Try not to think about the negative thoughts. Why doesn't that work? Because the whole time you're trying to not think about the negative thoughts, all you're doing is thinking about the negative thoughts. That's right. It doesn't work.
And that becomes negative.
Right? So one reason why that doesn't work is because the mind was created to be occupied. It was not created to be empty space. Right? It was created to be occupied. The word says, let this mind, what? Be out of you? No, to be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. It says, meditate or think upon these things. Occupy till I come. The mind was created to be filled, to be occupied with good. The mind was not created to be empty. Now, there are certain practices that have been coming in from Eastern religions into Christianity and so on and so forth, and part of those practices encourage individuals to empty their minds so that God can speak to you, or so that the inner voice, or the inner knower, or the guide, or whatever you might call it, might then be able to speak to you and lead you and so on and so forth. And let me tell you from personal experience, I've been involved in it. And it's very powerful. It is very powerful. You empty your mind, you try to not think about any thoughts and anything of that nature, and then you listen for God to speak to you.
Amen.
And you know what He told me?
Stop this.
I love you, Mark. What's that?
Stop it.
Yeah. I love you, Mark. And I'm like, oh, that's just me making this stuff up. All right, clear my head, and so on. Love you, Mark, and so on. And I'm like, all right, is that you, God? Yeah. And so on. And so, started to learn to listen to that voice and so on, and then sit on Jesus' lap and let Him hug me and hug, and so on. And all this love that I needed. And it was just beautiful and wonderful and so on. And so I spent more and more time talking with God, listening to that voice and so on. And I spent less and less time with the Word. Spent less and less time with the Word. More and more time with the voice. and asking questions. What should I do? What decisions should I make? And other things of that nature. And a couple of years down the road, made a really bad choice based upon that voice. And I was really, taken aback and going, all right, well, what's going on, God? How come this thing did not work out? You were saying it was going to work out. It did not work out. And so a little while longer, and another really bad decision that made, in response to that voice. And I really had to step back and say, hang on, what's going on? And so I counseled with some friends, and they said, that's not how God operates. Yes, you can talk to him. Yes, he does reveal things to you, but he has his word. And it's kind of like a relationship with somebody who's mute. Right? You can ask questions, but how are they going to respond?
That's what they know how.
Yeah, they're going to write. If you don't know sign language, they're going to write it out, and you get to read it, and you go, oh, okay, well, that's what their response is. Well, in the Word of God, God has anticipated every important question and everything that we need to know, and He's put it there already. And if you've got a question and you want to know, you go look for it, because it's there, or the principle behind it is there. And so I had to reorient and come back to the Word and begin to search the Word for the principles that were involved in the decisions that I needed to make, so that it would be according to the Word and not just according to a voice. Because how come that voice sounded just like God and just like Jesus? Where did he come from? Where does Satan come from? From heaven. He knows exactly what it's like. He knows what it's like to be in the presence of God, doesn't it? Doesn't the Word say that he can make himself an angel of light?
Yeah.
Well, that's what he was when he was created, wasn't he? Yeah, he can transform himself into an angel of light, and he can sound really good. Really good. And make you feel really good, too. But if it takes you away from the standard of the Word, watch out. So, the mind was created to be occupied, not to be empty. The Christian meditation is filling your mind with the Word. It's filling your mind with the Word. It's filling your mind with thoughts of the life of Christ and so on and so forth. It's not emptying your mind so that someone can talk to you. Now, it's appropriate to be in a quiet location and not have a lot of distractions and other things like that while you commune with the Lord. And yes, He does still talk to individuals, and I still have, quotes, conversations with God. It's not a conversation with God, but there are thoughts that I have, and I compare those with the Word of God, and I go, oh, it fits. Right? So this must be from God. Right? And so on. So the mind was created to be occupied, but the second principle of the mind that really brings us freedom is the mind can only focus on one thing at a time. It can only focus on one thing at a time. So, if I tell you, don't think about the big fat lazy cat. All right, don't think about the big fat lazy cat. So what are you going to do? Think about it. Don't think about it. No, don't think about the fat lazy cat. No, don't. No, stop it. Oh, no, don't think about it. Oh.
Comfortable cat.
What are you doing the whole time?
Yeah, just chilling there.
Yeah, having a good time. Yeah. So if I tell you don't think about the fat lazy cat, if you want to overcome, well, just think about the happy dog. Right? I mean, doesn't he look happy? Yeah, it looked like he was just groomed and had a nice bath and probably had his, his nails trimmed and so on. And somebody probably got Photoshopped and grabbed the edges of his, and just pulled it a little bit more so it looked like a smile. Where'd the cat go?
Didn't think about it.
Oh, cat's gone. How hard was that?
Dog ate it.
No, yeah. Dog's happy because he ate the cat. Yeah. Actually, he's probably about the size of it. No, he's smaller than the cat. Yeah. Anyway, so it's not hard to overcome some thought because all you have to do is replace it with something else. That's right. All you have to do is displace the one thought by actively thinking about something else. And that is your key to overcoming negative thoughts, is actively thinking about something else. Now, what is it that you should be thinking about to replace the negative thoughts that you have been thinking about?
That's word.
Yeah, the Word of God, right? That which is true. We're told in 2 Corinthians 10:5, casting down arguments and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. So, now let's get away from fat cats and dogs. Let's go to real stuff, like failure. Anybody ever struggled with failure? Me too. Years of addictions and promising God that I'm going to stop and trying to get over it and all that kind of stuff and going back to it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, and oh, God, punish me if I don't, stop, and so on, and take this away and do this to me and all this kind of stuff, and still going back to it over and over again. And you get to the point where, I feel like I can't do it. So why even try? So is that a God thought or not a God thought?
No.
It's not a God thought. What's the God thought?
I can do all things.
That's right. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So, if you're struggling with the failure thoughts, I can't do it, so why try? Then what I suggest is go old-fashioned, old school. 3x5 cards. They still make these things, Right?
Old.
That's right. They're old school. They still make them. So you get a 3x5 card and put the promise on there. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Philippians 4:13. And then you put a simple prayer of faith along with it as well. And the simple prayer of faith is something like this. Thank you, Lord, for giving me the truth of your word. So 1, you acknowledge that God's word is true. 2, you choose to believe what the promise says, that I will overcome. Why? Because you said so. And 3, you thank him for accomplishing it. Thank you for helping me overcome. So, if you're struggling with the I can'ts or the failure, then you pull out your 3x5 card and read it out loud, because faith comes by hearing and hearing by the word of God. And so you read, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Philippians 4:13. Thank you, Lord, for giving me the truth of your word. I choose to believe that I will overcome because you said so. Thank you for helping me overcome. Or thank you for giving me the victory. Whatever it is. Right? Now, what happens if you get done with that and you still are struggling with the failure? Do it again. That's right. Do it again.
The word will lift you.
It's like being in a battle. And in the battle, it's old-fashioned battle. Swords and spears and all that kind of stuff. And it's hand-to-hand combat. It's none of this few thousand miles away type of stuff. No, it's hand-to-hand combat. And there's an instrument that you can use. It's called the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, in that battle. Now, what happens if you go to battle, a battle of this type, and you leave the sword at home? What do you think is going to happen to you? Yeah, you're going to lose the battle, right? It's going to be slightly painful, and then you're done for, right? So it's good to bring the sword to the battle, but what if you bring the sword to the battle and you leave it in a sheath and never take it out? What then? You're still going to die. Now, what if you do the good Christian thing and you pull out the sword and you take one whack at the enemy? It is written, whoop, and then you put the sword back and the enemy is still engaged.
Pull it out again.
You're still going to die just a few seconds later. That's right. The only way you're going to survive and then win the battle is the entire time the enemy is engaged.
You're engaged too.
You're engaged as well with the word. Right? And the battlefield is not for your toenails.
For your mind.
That's right, it's for your mind. So the battlefield is right here. And so it's of the mind and it's in the thoughts, right? That's where the battlefield is. And so if the thoughts are there, then you know what thoughts generate? Feelings, that's right. Feelings are the result of thoughts. Right? Feelings are the result of thoughts. Well, they're the result of chemicals, so you can inject chemicals into the body, and that can change how you feel. But it's primarily by thoughts that you change the chemicals that then you have the feelings associated with them. So if you still have the feeling, that means you still have the chemicals there. Well, that's okay. Keep going with the right thoughts. It'll change the chemicals that are released, and then it'll change how you feel. That's right.
I feel good.
That's right. So, our brains are really awesome. How God has created them. And there's all these pathways. There's these super highways that are there. And interneuronal connections that are there in the brain. And it's quite interesting to see how that whole system works. Every thought you have, it changes the structure of the brain. You have little dendrites, which are little connection, little spikes that come and connect to different neurons at different places in the neurons and so on. And some of those, with every thought, you're gonna bud some new dendrites, or you're going to prune some so that they're not there anymore. And by the pattern of thinking that you have, you set up actually a physical pathways in the brain itself, and so you get these super highways that are going there. And sometimes when you're stuck in a certain pattern and mode of thinking, wow, it's so easy. It's like getting on the freeway and right? My wife and I, we lived in the jungle for a while, and the villagers, they would go off into the jungle in order to go, work on their farms that they had made a few hours away, and so on, and carry the 80-pound packs of bananas on their head through the jungle and everything with a blood pressure of 80/40. And we didn't know that at the beginning, and so when we had our first deliveries, we thought, oh no, she's bleeding out. I mean, her blood pressure's so low. And then after a while, we realized that no, they pretty much all have blood pressures that low. And anyways, so when you're going through the jungle, I mean, it's like this. You want to go through? It's easy. You just find the path, and you stay on the path, and you go, whoop, 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 and you can keep going and following along, and it's easy. And eventually you get to a river or some other thing, and you see somebody's farm off to the side, and you're like, that's great. But what happens if you want to go over here? Or you want to go over there? Yeah, not so easy. You got to get this thing out, and then you got to go whack and whack and whack and whack and whack, and you do a whole bunch of whacking, and you get very little motion. Yeah. And then you come back to it tomorrow. Get that machete, and you do some more whacking and whacking and whacking, all these vines and trees and everything and bushes and everything in your way, and you get a little bit farther, and you come back the next day and you do a whole bunch of whacking, and you come back the next day and you do a whole bunch of whacking, and you haven't made it very far. But then you come back to it and you do some more whacking, and you clean some of it up and so on, and you keep doing it and you keep doing it and you keep doing it and you keep doing it, and guess what? Yeah. Eventually you've got a path, and it becomes an easy path to go on. And if you stop going on the old pathway, guess what happens to it? Starts growing over. So eventually over time, the new pathway becomes the easy way. That's right. It becomes the natural way. But it's not like that at the beginning. So when you start on the journey of taking thoughts captive, it's like being in the jungle, and you got that 3x5 card out, and you're using it all the time, and it's like, oh man, I'm not going to be able to live life and do this at the same time. Well, let life aside. That other stuff will take care of itself. Win the battle. This is the real battle, right? As often as you need to use that 3x5 card, use it. And be consistent with it. The more consistent you are, the faster you win the war. Right? Now, I remember going through this process, and it was probably a couple of months into this, and my wife and I had learned a little bit of transparency by this time. I'll tell you that. There's a backstory to that, which I'll tell you next. Anyway, so we were having kind of our review time at the end of the day, and she was asking me about the negative thoughts because I finally fessed up about what was going on with my negative thoughts and how that led to negative behaviors and other things of that nature. And so she was asking me about the negative thoughts, and I was like, she's like, what? I didn't have one of them today. I didn't have a single one of those negative thoughts today. Oh, hallelujah, praise the Lord. I didn't know I could go a minute without these negative thoughts. And here I was. I had a whole day that I went without them. I was like, oh, yes, praise the Lord, this works. Oh, this is so good. So good. All right. Now, that wasn't the end of the battle. There were still battles to come along the way, but it was a marker along the way where I went, oh, this is working. Praise God. Right? And then one of the things that I discovered later is that one of the things that plagued me was these. I would have dreams at night, and in my dreams, I would be right back into my addictions. I'd be giving in to them. I'd wake up, and my heart is pounding. I am in a sweat, and I just... and oh. Praise God, that was just a dream. That was just a dream. But after waking up from a dream like that, it was harder. That next day, and the negative thoughts were really, it was harder to overcome this. And I was always giving in to the addictions in my dreams. But what I found out was, a few years later, I started actually refusing this stuff in my dreams. And I started having victories in my dreams. And then I'd wake up and I'd be like, oh, it's cool. So from my experience, the dreams lag a few years behind the conscious victories that you have, and that's okay. And nobody has any guilt for what they dream, and so don't take it from a guilty standpoint. So with the 3x5 cards, I recommend 1, 2, or 3. I don't recommend any more than 3. Because if you're going out to battle and the enemy jumps at you really fast, you don't want to be looking around at 50, 60 weapons and going, hang on, which one do I choose? Right? You're dead. So you want a few, use them well. Right? Know what you got, use them well. You don't want a whole Rolodex. I've got a friend and she's got like 250. A Rolodex, Well, it's great. I mean, it's great to have a Rolodex of those promises, but it doesn't work for this, right? It doesn't work for this. Because, you'd be sitting there flipping through it and you'd be going, hang on, I remember it said something, and what book was that in? And what chapter? And, and so on, and how do I get to that? And, you'd be half an hour into those negative thoughts before you ever find the promise to go along with it. So get 1, 2, or 3, and there's the 4-second rule. What's the 4-second rule? Well, the moment you realize that you're thinking the negative thoughts, you got 4 seconds to pull out your 3x5 card and begin reading it out loud. Now, you could have been thinking about this stuff for the last 10 hours. But right now, you're like, oh. From the moment that you realize that you're doing it, all right, now you got 4 seconds, pull out your 3x5 card and begin to read it out loud. Now, there's other things too. Maybe you feel like you're unloved. That was another one that I struggled with, feeling like I'm unloved. I had a patient a number of years ago, I think it was her second marriage, and she was relating this to me. She was a mess, really a mess, in every way that you could possibly think of. And so she was just broken, and poor thing. And it was her second marriage, and she was downstairs. She was ironing her husband's shirt or something, clothes, whatever it was. And he came out, the stairway went up, and the bedroom was off to the side. And he came out of the bedroom, and he looked down at her, and he yelled at her, and he said, "How does it feel to be unloved and unwanted?" And went back and slammed the door. Well, how did she feel?
Unloved and unwanted.
Unloved and unwanted, of course. Right? So, yeah, if you've ever been there, well, you know what it feels like. And so, yeah, being in love. I often, after I have, learned these things, then I have thought about a number of these scenarios. And one of the ones that I thought about was, well, what if it was a reverse scenario? And I was doing something for my wife down in the living room, and she came out and she said, "How does it feel to be unloved and unwanted?" I don't know. Go back to do what I'm doing. I don't know. I don't know. What is it like to be unloved and unwanted? I don't know. Because God has always loved me.
That's right.
And He's always wanted me.
All I need is His love.
That's right. I don't know. So, if you feel unloved, well, a promise that you could use is Jeremiah 31:3. I have loved you with an everlasting love. Therefore, with loving kindness, I have drawn you. Oh, beautiful, beautiful, right? So, you can get your Jeremiah 31:3 card. Or your unloved card. I have loved you with an everlasting love, therefore with loving kindness I have drawn you. Thank you, Lord, for giving me the truth of your word. I choose to believe that I am loved because you said so. Thank you for loving me. And if you get done with that and you still feel unloved, what do?
Read it again.
Do it again. That's right.
It'll take hold.
Yeah, it will. Right? And you believe it not because you're doing it. You believe it because it's God's word.
Word won't go
And
forward.
He's trustworthy. And He cannot lie. And power always goes with His word.
That's right.
And He will give you the power to overcome. Maybe you feel guilty. That was me too. I mean, again, addictions and all that kind of stuff. Guilt is all a part of the addiction cycle. So, I got to this point of thinking, well, you know what? I think I've been too bad to be forgiven. Gone too far. God's, it worked for others, not worked for me. And so on. Well, is it true? Is that a God thought or not a God thought? It's not a God thought. What does God's word say? It says, if we confess our sins, He is faithful and just and will forgive us our sins and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. Oh, beautiful, right? It doesn't matter what it was. It's not like He got to the cross and went, oh no, that one's too big. Right? Oh, no, can't pay for that one. No, you did that too many times. Can't pay for that either. No. He can forgive if we confess. Right? So you take your guilty card. If I confess my sin, I like the first tense. If I confess my sins, you are faithful and just to forgive me of my sins and to cleanse me from all unrighteousness. Thank you, Lord, for giving me the truth of your word. I choose to believe that I am forgiven. Why? Because you said so. Not because I feel like it, but because you said so. Thank you for forgiving me. And you take that battle to its completion. Now, that might not be what you're dealing with. I mean, you might be dealing with fear. That's a common one. So, what I recommend is that you do a thought journal. What's a thought journal? Well, you just take a day, half a day, 2 days probably at max, and you write down the negative thoughts that run through your head. Just write them down. And if you're not sure if they're negative or not, write it down. If you know it's truly a positive thought, well, you don't have to write it down because this is a negative thought journal for right now. Just to identify negative thoughts or potentially negative thoughts. And once you have them down, then categorize them. So there might be fear or worry thoughts. They might be unloved or unwanted thoughts. There might be failure or defeat thoughts. They might be guilt or shame thoughts. They might be unworthiness or inadequacy thoughts. They might be bitterness or anger thoughts. They might be loneliness or abandonment thoughts. This is not an exhaustive list, it's a representative list. And so you get those thoughts and you categorize them under whatever category they fit. And if they fit under several categories, that's okay. You can put it under several categories. And then you look at it and you go, okay, which is the worst category for me? Because I'm thinking this all the time, and I'm thinking this all the time, and so on, right? What's the worst category for me? All right? You're going to pick that one. What's my second worst category? Well, you can pick that. And what's my third worst category? Well, you can pick that. I wouldn't go more than the top 3. If you just want to pick the top one, that's okay. That's okay. If you just want to pick one category and start with that, that's okay. Don't go more than 3. Because then you're going to be swimming in cards, and you're going to be, and you're going to be trying to diversify your battle too much, and it's just not going to work. You can only focus on one thing at a time. Yes.
You'll need a card for OCD at that point.
Yeah, you'll need your OCD card then.
Amen.
That's right. Then, once you have that category identified, then you go to the Word, and you look for promises that speak to you the opposite of what that category is. So again, if you feel unloved, then Jeremiah 31:3, I have loved you with an everlasting love, therefore with loving kindness I have drawn you. Or John 3:16, for God so loved you that he gave his only begotten Son, that if you believe in him, you should not perish but have everlasting life. Or if it's fear, Isaiah 41:10, fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. Yes, I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. If it's bitterness, then Ephesians 4:31 and 32. Let all bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice, and be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God in Christ forgave you. And so on, right? Texts that speak to your heart the truth, that's the opposite of what that lie is. And then follow it with a simple prayer of faith that goes something like this. Thank you, Lord, for giving me the truth of your word. I choose to believe blank, whatever the promise promised. Right? I choose to believe I have nothing to fear because you are with me. And it doesn't have to necessarily say because you said so. Sometimes that doesn't fit perfect. Okay, well, it's a guide, not a formula. Right? And thank you for accomplishing whatever the promise promises. Thank you for giving me peace. Thank you for taking away my fear. Thank you for whatever it might be. Put it on your 3x5 card. Go to battle. Right? Go to battle. And in doing so, trusting in his word, you will overcome. Right? It's hard at the beginning. You have that card out a lot at the beginning. But over time, there's a longer break in between and a longer break, and those negative thoughts don't scream at you so loud. They get softer and softer and quieter and more in the background until eventually the new way of thinking becomes the easy way of thinking. It becomes default. Praise God. Yeah. Any questions right now? Then we're going to take a break and go to the key to victory. Yes.
What about accountability partners?
Okay, what about accountability partners? Accountability can be excellent, right? And in a time, especially with somebody who's dealing with addictions and other things of that nature, accountability can be key. It can be crucial to having somebody or a group of somebodies or so on that you have transparency with, yes, and that you trust, and that you can share your struggles with, that will hold you accountable to what you're doing, what you're saying, but will do so in a loving manner.
Should they be the same duck as you?
Should they be the same duck?
Yeah.
It would be best if it's the same duck, somebody who's no longer in it.
Right.
Somebody who's overcome it. That's usually your best choice, is somebody that's overcome the same thing that you have.
Do you find that God removes the addiction, or He teaches you how to overcome the addiction?
It's a cooperative process.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a cooperative process. There are definitely instances where individuals have asked God and said, you know what, I can't give this thing up. And take the desire for this thing away from me. And God has definitely done that. They're like, the next time they put a cigarette in their mouth, they're like, oh, this is disgusting. Or the next time they went to drink a beer, it tasted, well, I won't tell you what they said. It tasted like anyways. And it was just disgusting, and they couldn't even stand it, and they thought, oh, that was and then they tried another one and another one and another one, and then they were finally convinced God actually answered their prayer. So yes, there are definitely those components as well, but there's the components where God cannot control what you think.
Right.
And so that he has left with you to choose who you're going to take the thoughts from. Right? Who are you going to accept the thoughts from? Right? And so there, can you change what you desire? No. But God, when he's given permission, can change what you desire. Can you change what you're attracted to? No. But God, when given permission, can come in and change what you're attracted to. Right? And so there's a cooperative process between the two. Yeah. But accountability, yeah, definitely. Yes, I had to have accountability measures as well. And I needed them at the time because I was weak, real weak. Yes.
I got another one.
All right. Yes.
Do you think most of the thoughts that you get are from satanic beings and the enemy and yourself rather than God?
Okay, so the question for those that are online, do you think that the thoughts that you get are mostly from Satan or his angels and yourself rather than God?
Right.
Well, I would have said that about my life previously, absolutely, because that's what I was thinking. Sure, I'd go to church on the weekend, but the whole time, even sitting in church, I have negative thoughts running through my head. And even through the weekend running, and then through the week, all of those negative thoughts running through my head. Right now, no. Now, does that mean that I don't have any negative thoughts? No, that doesn't mean that I don't have any negative thoughts. But I have learned to take those thoughts captive. And I still find myself in situations where I'll have these thoughts that will be going through my head, and then I realize what's going on. And then I go to battle. Right? And and take that thought captive, begin to think about the Word of God and change the focus of those thoughts. Right? Even today, I was mowing the lawn. And while I was mowing the lawn, I had some negative thoughts that came to me, and I was like, man, where did that come from? Oh yeah, I don't need to be thinking about these. And then changing the focus of that. But does God suggest thoughts? Yes. Does the enemy suggest thoughts? Yes. Do you have thoughts? Yes. And but every thought is what should I say? Every thought comes from information, and information has a source. Good comes from God. Evil, or a mixture of good and evil, comes from the enemy. Question?
Could it be also that we expose ourselves to that information? Like when I used to listen to all kind of secular music, I would things in my head because what the senses that I exposed myself to the negative things.
Right, so is it that you can expose yourself to being in a receptive environment for those negative thoughts? And the answer is yes. I mean, you can put yourself into situations that will not be very helpful for you. And it can be the music, it can be the ambiance, it can be the conversations of individuals around you and other things like that. And so yes, you do have a responsibility for the environment that you get yourself into by your own choices. Now there's times that you're in an environment not by your own choice, and well, that's okay. The Lord is there, and He can help you. But if that's what should I say? If it's an environment that you feel that you're succumbing to, it's a good decision to leave. Okay. All right. Just to let you know, the stuff at the back table will be here for a few more minutes, well actually during this break, and then it's going to be going away and it won't be coming back tomorrow. So if you want anything, go ahead and get it now. We're going to have about a 10-minute break, and then we're going to be back and looking at the key to victory.
Then I rebuke that spirit in the name of Jesus. And oftentimes it will flee. I'm not come back again. If something gets the devil coming back and just saying, you know, win that victory. And say, yes, I am. Yes, I have. In the name of Jesus, I rebuke you. In the name of Jesus, and it will flee.
No, not really, actually, it's a new global
Jesus.
on there, so it's
Yeah, we battle that. World
so
of
new,
flesh
there's no
and
shower
blood.
curtain, a lot of water, it's not on, you know.
Struggle is not against flesh and blood.
And I wrote down tribal spirits because the Bible says I'm trying who it is. Is it me? Is it God? I'm trying
You
to
know, we
decide
kind of
if it's
just
a
start
the
with
enemy.
smell, and there's so much work out there.
So we're not doing
So it seems like when you do your job, for one person, they tell somebody else.
you don't.
It's just me and another guy with his son. Take a lot of people.
You're not guilty for what you're unless you purposely put yourself in the situation to see it. So if you go to strip clubs and you see something that you shouldn't see, well, don't be surprised because you put yourself into that situation. But from, just living on, not putting yourself in the situation. You're not guilty of what you're here. You're not guilty of what somebody else.
There's usually what you're
There is.
Well, like I said before, with goals, you keep going and going, but you gotta weigh it down. But you're able to keep the house here.
He was here. He said I could hurt here, I could hurt home.
Oh, boy, it sure is.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I just let it go.
Yeah, I was thinking of recommending that guy to other people because for that price.
Great deals of cost to help us plan.
Oh, that's great.
Finally, I was able to deal with that individual.
Yeah. Yeah, you just gotta find the right person. There's so many of those mineral tubs. So, I don't know if that's what it's called.
Never a negative thought, no.
They're from Dallas.
Like a wing takes life.
We use those events, the only problem is they get really hot, remember, black in the summer. You just gotta keep them water.
Or one, two, right?
Well, you can also order marketplace, I don't know if you're available, but marketplace. It's kind of like Craigslist.
Look to watch, because it's fun. Have these negative dreams and thoughts. All this time is fun.
Oh, so you
Just like,
It can be used.
I don't think I quite understand your forgiveness issues. I understand, you know, when David sinned against Bathsheba, it wasn't against her, it was against God. And I've known that for a long time when I've sinned against God. And me and you may not agree. There's a lot of organizations that are self-help organizations that agree with making amends. There's scripture where there's a parable that talks about a rich ruler who a man owed a great debt. And he went and gave the debt to the man, and he walked out the door and got over $5 and he threw the debt. So I don't quite understand where there's not an issue where you have to forgive, make some kinds of amends to be free from the guilt and the shame that you're feeling. Now you may be saying, well, you're feeling something false. I don't know. I'll go one of those, in James it talks about if you receive mercy, you receive mercy, you need to forgive mercy. So there seems to be a reciprocal thing back and forth between this horizontal relationship between me and you.
Part of I see those things we talk about in the
First meeting, well, the one last night, that's the only other one I want to say
There's a lot of people that but they don't even realize
you use an axe handle or an axe that you can restore. And I don't discard a life for life. Then where am I missing it? What did I not hear what you said? Just
Makes you kind of walk the street.
you know, I'm a 10. Okay.
Still with me, very young, right now.
try to use that.
I'm not saying it well. Well, I have asked, I understand fully and that was one group because I've had and I was picking up and the sin that I committed was against Almighty God. And I repented of it. And I can do things, okay? And I go with there again. And it got so bad that I but the one thing that I always held on to, one thing that convinced me I wasn't totally lost, reprobate, was that I can't, it's in the gospel. It says he won't take you out of the burning flax and quench a fire and take a bruise free. I knew there was still something I still wanted it. I couldn't walk out, but I knew I wanted it. And so what happened to me was how I got turned around was I joined some organization that had accountability. That's what I had. I couldn't turn around and all
It wasn't if you're up to yourself.
Instead of parking on the road, you figure it out yourself.
And I'll highlight that. It may not have come across
People
well.
in just
Well, that's why I-
when you
But no, you're right.
Some of us that in the throes need other folks to help us. And when we get, and I can relate to your dream issue too. Because I still get dreams. And I had one Friday or Saturday night last week.
Yeah.
And that's when the enemy comes and visits you in the night season.
Yeah. Then I wake up and I go, oh, praise God, it's not your night. And begin with prayer.
And then there's lingering thoughts. I have to battle. So,
All right. Test. All right. We will continue on because we still have good stuff to cover, and I've got to try to pack it all into today and tomorrow. And oh, there's so much more to cover. So we're going to look at now at the key to victory, and really it has to do with this thing here, surrender. But it goes along with this thing here entirely, right? So it's an entire surrender, a complete surrender. That really is the key to victory. And keep in mind this picture because it's going to play into this whole thing in a little bit. So I grew up going to church. My parents were Christians, and they went to church. I grew up going to church. I went to a church school, and I went to church school and from my little kindergarten years all the way up through my high school years. And I went to a Bible college, and then when I did medical school, I went to the last existing Christian medical school in the United States, Loma Linda. And so I did Christian education all along the way, and so I could probably boast with Paul and say that I was a Pharisee of Pharisees and of the tribe of this, and and so on and so forth, and I could boast about all of those things. But what I found is that I was stuck. I was stuck because I really loved the world and I loved the things that were offered to me. And, I loved television and I loved radio and I loved movies and I loved all this kind of stuff. And I had friends that were not exactly the best influence upon me, and they had things that they loved and they taught me to love the things that they loved. And we got into stuff, and then we got into other stuff, and we got into other stuff as well. and of course, having Christian parents, you don't want them to know what you're doing, so you lie, and you keep secrets, and you run around behind their back, and you do all of that kind of stuff, and then you appear good on the weekend when you go to church, and so that was my life. And I loved everything that was killing me, but I did love the idea of Jesus and heaven and other things like that, because they did raise me with, this idea of Jesus, and Jesus loved little children, and the stories of the Bible and other things of that nature. And so I had that going on one side, but then I had these other desires that were in completely the opposite direction that were going on as well, and both of them seemed to exist in me, and I felt very schizophrenic. I did. I felt very schizophrenic. In fact, there were some times in my life where I wondered whether I did have more than one personality in me, because the darkness on one side was so dark, and yet the apparent niceness of the other side was just, they were incongruent, completely incongruent, but both were inside of me. And I remember at times actually wishing that I was demon possessed. Like, yeah. Huh? Why would anybody? That's stupid. Why would anybody ever wish to be demon possessed? That's right. Somebody could just cast the thing out of me, and I'd be all better. Right. So even that wish to be demon possessed was really a cry to be saved. Right? A cry to be free. I wanted to be free. I found myself bound. I couldn't get out of it. I tried all sorts of stuff to get out. And I'm a fairly analytical individual, at least at times. I don't analyze what somebody is wearing. I don't analyze what they've done with their hairdo. I don't analyze those types of things. So if wardrobe changes or haircuts change or other things like that, I don't have a clue. But when it comes to other stuff, I will analyze it. And just some, backstory of myself. And so I recognize that at least in the Bible, there were people that were victorious. They were living in the land of victory. You had your Abrahams, and you had your Davids and your Daniels, and David, messed a lot of things up, but he still, came along at the end. And then you had your Josephs and, Daniels and others that were in the Bible, and Paul and so on and so forth. And I thought, man, there's people that have victory. And I looked around in the church that I was in, and there were some holy saints that were there. And I thought, man, they look like they're living in the land of victory as well. And so on. And so what do they do, right? If you're in the land of victory, what do you do? And I saw that there were some comparisons, some things that came along. Well, they pray. Okay, yeah. And they read their Bible. Okay. And they serve. All right. And they obey. All right. So if I'm in the land of defeat, and that's what they do in the land of victory, so what should I do?
Join the land of doing those things.
That's right. So let's do those things. So let's pray, right? So I started doing that. My parents divorced around the time when I was about 14. And that was the beginning of kind of latchkey kid life. I've got a half brother, half sister that are older than me, 7 years and 5 years. And so my brother was long gone from the home. My sister was just about launching, and she really wasn't around. And my mother was working full time as a nurse, 3 to 11 shifts, and so on. And so I'm going to school, in the mornings, and then most of the time riding my bike back and forth, and so on, and so most of the time now nobody's home. and so now I've got plenty of freedom. I still have some responsibilities, but I got plenty of freedom, and I'm like, okay, well, life really is not the greatest right now, and so let's pray. Well, yeah, I went to Christian schools my whole life, but nobody taught me how to pray. I mean, they taught you to pray, but they didn't tell you how to pray, right? Like, how do you talk to somebody that doesn't talk back? It's like, sometimes you wonder, am I crazy? And sometimes you just wonder if your prayers just go, ooh. There it is, right over there. You know, about that effective. And when it's about that effective, it's not hard for something to come along and get you off a schedule. And now it's like months later before you're like, oh yeah, I should probably pray again. You know. So I tried it, and I'm still a miserable wretch, and you know, couldn't get out of my stuff and whatever. All right, so let's read the Bible. All right, so I got a Bible in a Year Bible, and I read it in almost 2 years. I got through it. Praise the Lord. Ding, 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 ding. Right? I read the whole thing. Right? I'm still the same miserable person that I was before. Still struggling with the same stuff. Still, just stuck. All right. And, and I've read it multiple times. And still. Service. All right. Well, what about that? Okay. So when I was in Bible college, I took a year out and I went to the mission field and spent a year in the mission field. And then I took another year out and I spent a year in the mission field. That first year when I went to the mission field, I told you before, I discovered when I was 21, everywhere you go, there you are. That's right. Because I went to the mission field thinking I'm going to be a missionary. And there I was, the same miserable person in the mission field with the same thoughts, the same feelings, the same addictions, the same everything in the mission field. It was so disappointing.
Changing environment won't work.
That's right. Yeah.
Changing heart works.
That's right. Changing the environment won't work, but changing the heart will. And my heart was not changed. Because I was looking at my heart changing by going and doing something. Right? Well, that didn't work. And I've done, we've spent years in the mission field. So what about obedience? Well, yeah, well, yeah, that's the problem. Right? That's the problem. So here I am trying to do everything that they do in the land of victory, and to me it seems like here they are in the land of victory, and here I am, and there's this invisible force field between us, and every time I try to get across to the other side, it's just like bam, oh man, bam, no, can't get across, bam, can't get across. There is something wrong, I just can't get across. What's wrong? I don't know. All right, well, let's go back to the wheelbarrow. So, Charles Blondin, he was a famous tightrope artist in the mid-1800s. Really great at what he did. He was a Frenchman. Oh, I was going to mention this. The whole forgiveness issue, as was highlighted, I don't think I highlighted it well. With the forgiveness issue, yes, bitterness is resolved at the cross. Forgiveness, that whole process of forgiveness does involve resolving things with others from your standpoint. So it does involve apologizing to others for what you have done. It does involve restoring things that you might have stolen or been involved in, defrauding others of, and so on and so forth. It does involve those things as well, right? That's part of the process. Yes, you resolve things with God. Your bitterness is resolved at the cross alone, not with others, but that leads you to restore things. And if you think you come to the cross and accept that forgiveness and go free, but you're unwilling to go and resolve and restore things, you're mistaken. You're mistaken. So I needed to put that point in. All right, so Charles Blondin, famous tightrope artist. When he was 4, he began practicing the tightrope. 4-year-old. I mean, Anderson, our little Anderson running around, he's 4. I can't imagine him practicing the tightrope. But anyways, he started at 4, and by the time he was 5, he was really good at what he did. He came from France, and then he came to the United States, and he worked for like Barnum and Bailey and some of the other, major circuses, and he was great at what he did. Well, on June 30, 1859, he had a great publicizer, and 25,000 people came out to watch Charles Blondin attempt to cross Niagara Falls on a tightrope. And the place where he chose, it was 1,100 feet across from one side to the other. He had a 3-inch hemp rope that was tied to a big tree on the New York side and eventually tied to a big boulder on the Canadian side. And at its lowest point, it was about 15 and a half stories above the, the water and the falls and everything below. So it was a pretty good distance, not just a short little thing. And so Charles Blondin, he starts from on the New York side, and we'll do New York side over here. So he begins on the New York side, and he has a balance bar. That balance bar is 50 pounds. I didn't know they were that heavy, but I guess that makes sense because up there you get wind gusts and other things like that. And if you've ever been to Niagara, you know that they have angry seagulls all over the place too, and they like dive bombing. And of course, 50 pounds is a little bit too much to go, But he had that, and he started working his way across from New York over towards Canada, and he successfully made it across over to the other side. It's great. The crowd is cheering and so on. There's a few of the ladies that passed out. The historical records say it's probably because their corsets were a little tight, and so on. And so then he gets that balance bar and he puts it down, and then he starts working his way back across to the other side, just using his arms. He gets about halfway across. He sits down on the line, and he pulls something out of his jacket, takes a swig of that, puts it back in, and then gets back on the line and works his way back across to the other side. I won't tell you that it wasn't water. I mean, I did tell you it wasn't water, but anyways. So he gets back across to the New York side, and then he gets a wheelbarrow. That wheelbarrow. And he puts the wheel on the line, and he begins to work his way across from New York to Canada. 1,100 feet across, 15 and a half stories above, and he makes it safely across to the other side.
Where was the pole?
Huh?
Didn't have the pole.
Actually, it has. Where is it? There is a mount. Oh, see right here? There's a little spike right there, and there's a little spike right there. That's where a pole can go across it, and then put on those spikes, and then it can have a little bit of balance on both sides. So yeah, that's what those little spikes are. So yes, he went across from one side to the other. Now, in his entire career, Charles Blondin crossed Niagara Falls over 300 times. He was great at what he did. One time, he went across and he had a stove with him, and he carried it out there, and he balanced it on the line, and he made omelets. Yeah, while he was out there on the line. And there was another time that he went out, and he had a gunny sack tied around his head, so he was blindfolded. So he went across blindfolded. There was another time when he had somebody on his back. His manager, Harry, the only one that would go, and so he carried Harry on his back across from one side to the other. And another time he went on stilts.
Wow.
Yes, this man is good. He's really good at what he does. Right. So the story is told that one day Charles Blondin was doing, his act there at the canyon, and of course a crowd is there watching and so on. And he's doing his stuff, and maybe he's out there juggling on the line, and and those different things. And then for his grand finale, he gets out there and he jumps and he does a flip, and then lands on the line, and so on. And I've seen them do this. I've gone to the circus and seen somebody do a flip on the tightrope way up there. Crazy. But he was good at what he did. And of course the crowd is, and so on. He's done. That was his grand finale. He's done. But everybody wants more. They want an encore. So as a performer, you're either going to up the ante, or you're going to
Get a refund.
Yeah, you're going to distribute and disperse the crowd somehow. And so he's thinking, and he gets this idea. He says, "Oh, who believes that I can get someone safely across in a wheelbarrow?"
Oh.
Yeah. He goes, "Okay, I need a volunteer."
Master.
So the tightrope. This is of course, that's an analogy. He was real, and his, he did was real, but that's an analogy. It's the canyon is sin, and sin separates us from God, and victory, right? Separates us from victory. And it's not a thin dividing line between the land of defeat and the land of victory. It's a huge canyon in between, made by sin. And there's there's a tightrope. The life of Christ. Birth to death, not a thread missing. Perfect, all along the way. And Jesus stands there on the rope with the wheelbarrow. He said, come on, get in. I'll take you across to the other side. Easy decision? Not an easy decision. Can you imagine being on the edge of a canyon? It's several hundred feet down, and you've got a wheelbarrow, and there's a line right there, and somebody's standing holding the wheelbarrow, and all you have is a wheel with the line, and they say, come on, get in. You know how many things could go wrong just in the process of getting in? Mm-hmm. You know, you put your knee not in the middle, you put it off to the side.
Perfect.
Right? Yeah. You know? It's just like, you want me to what? To get into that? Are you crazy? I'm standing on the ground. Thank you very much. Belief, in a Bible sense, is not standing on the ground looking at Jesus saying, yeah, I believe you can get me across. Belief, in a Bible sense, is
Surrender.
getting into the wheelbarrow. Getting into the wheelbarrow. And that is frightening. Absolutely frightening. Because you know, once you get into that wheelbarrow, you can have no more control. You surrender all control to someone else. And if they make a mistake, that's it. Gone. Right? Now, it's true over in the land of victory. Oh yeah, they pray, they read, they serve, they obey, they do all of that stuff. And so in the land of defeat, here am I, practicing the long jump. Right? Let's see how far I can jump, right? Oh, that wasn't so good. We need to work on it again, get our step right and everything, and we can get a little bit farther. And so on, right? And the more you practice, the farther you can get, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit, not so much more, and not so much more, because there's a curve, right? There's a limit that you come to. The world record for the long jump is really only 29 feet and 3-point-something inches. Nobody's ever made it to 30 feet with long jump before. What's 30 feet to an entire canyon?
Death.
Yeah, death. Certain death, right? I'm going to get across this thing. Oh, no. Right? So there I am practicing the long jump. What's the long jump? Well, I'm praying to get across to the other side. I'm reading my Bible to get across to the other side. I'm serving to get across to the other side. Trying to obey to get across to the other side. So I'm trusting in me doing these things to get me across to the other side. That's the long jump. And it would be miserable enough if it was just me, but it's not just me. You're there too. And maybe I've read the Bible more times than you have. Maybe I spend more time in prayer every morning than you do. Maybe I've been a missionary to more places and for more years than you have. Maybe I have this or that or the other thing, and I can look down my nose at you and go, well, at least I'm not so bad.
I made it 30 feet. You only made it 27.
That's right. You know. Right. But they, measuring themselves by themselves and comparing themselves among themselves, are not wise.
Amen.
How not wise? That not wise. Yeah. It's that not wise. Right? Jumping out of an airplane without a parachute. Not wise. But at least I'm not the only one, because you jumped out of the airplane without a parachute too. And maybe I wore baggier clothes than you did today.
I'll hit softer.
And I catch that wind, and I get a little bit more wind resistance and so on and so forth. And so now you're falling a little bit faster than me, and you're falling a little faster, and you're 5 feet ahead of me, and then you're 10 feet ahead of me, and then you're 15 feet ahead of me, and I'm like, oh, I'm not so bad after all. What's going to happen? Bam! Both dead. Right?
Few feet apart.
Yeah. In the time of a blink, you're gone, right? It never does you good to measure yourself by anyone else, right? So here I am practicing the jump, the long jump, praying, reading, serving, obeying, trying to get across on the other side. And as long as I trust in me doing these things to get me across to the other side, 100% long jump. Even if we're on the 50-50 plan, all right, Lord, I got this half, you get the other half. Long jump, still not working. And even if we get to the 99-1% plan, all right, God, I got this little bit, you got all the rest of it. It's still long jump. Okay. So there's a tightrope, and there's a wheelbarrow. Represents faith. And Jesus is standing there saying, "Come on, get in. I'll take you across to the other side." Those in the land of victory, sure, they do these things, but they don't do it to get across into the land of victory. They don't trust in themselves in doing those things to get them into victory. They do those things because they love the one who gets them into victory. And in that wheelbarrow, it's 100% Jesus. It's 0% me. I don't have anything to offer to get me across to the other side. Nothing. I have nothing in me to get me across there. All I can do is try to jump, and all I can do is fall and die by anything that I can do. But Jesus has done it. And he can do it. And he will give you what is necessary in order to be across to the other side, to be in the land of victory. He has all of that available for you, but he can't get you across when you're standing on the ground. He can only get you across in the wheelbarrow. And that's frightening. Frightening. So, this life of mine with the, kind of two-sided thing continued to go on. Met my wife, we got married. The darkness also continued during that time as well. And things sometimes were better. I had periods where we had accountability, and I was involved in some accountability groups, and then there was other times where we moved and there was no accountability, and things just went chaotic, spiral, and so on. And one day, I was doing my emergency medicine residency training in Michigan. It was February, cold, and I got off of a shift very late. I don't know, it was probably 11 o'clock or something like that, 10, 11 o'clock in the evening. And so it was dark, and I went to the locker, pulled out my parka, grabbed my phone, turned it on, and then I got a signal like that. And that meant there's a voice message. And so I listened to the voice message, and it was my wife. And she said, "Honey, I found out. And when you come home, I'll be waiting for you." I remember I was heading out in the parking lot, and I had this few 100 milliseconds of, and then gone. No. Couldn't feel anything. And I was just like, well, good. Because I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of lying. Let's just get this over with. And so I went home, and true to her word, she was waiting for me. And she confronted me with what she found, and I had nothing to deny. And yet, in every other time we had some uncomfortable encounters, I had always at least been able to feel sorry for being the slob that I was, and and not just a slob, but this time I couldn't feel sorry. I didn't feel sorry. I was just numb. And so this was new, and she's like, "Well, what's going on? Don't you even care anymore?" I said, "I don't know if I do. I don't know if I care." I had gotten to the point where I was just like, all right, you know what? God doesn't work. Praying doesn't work. None of this stuff works. I had gotten to the point where the only thing I could pray when I was alone and I thought I was actually talking to God was just, Lord, help. That was it. Now in public, I could pray. I could pray over food, and I could go to church and I could pray and I could do other things like that. But when it was me and God, the only thing I could pray was, Lord, help, and then just dive right back into the addictions and everything. And and I had such a low sense of my own value. I didn't trust myself, which it was that was reasonable because I was not trustworthy. And and I couldn't control myself. I couldn't control my responses. I had this huge anger issue that was going on. I'd blow up in a second, and I hated myself, and life was just so dark, and I was just ready to give up, give in, and let all of it go. And I was tired of fighting. I was tired of struggling. I was tired of failing. And I knew my wife didn't deserve to go down this pathway with me, that I was planning on just letting myself go down. Or the 2 children that we had at the time, which you haven't met because they're off in other places. But I was thinking of leaving her and leaving the children, and just letting the darkness take over and take me wherever it wanted to go, because it would just be easier than all of this fighting and trying. So that was the context in which she found out and confronted me. And so I'm done. I'm done. I don't have anything left. I'm not going to fight for anything. I'm done. And she goes out. It was early February. You know what holiday comes in the middle of February, right? So she goes out, and she goes and gets something, and she comes back, and she hands me a teddy bear. And she says, "Here, I got this for you for Valentine's. I was going to give it to you then, but I'm giving it to you now." This is wrong. So wrong. From what you just learned, how are you giving me a present? But one thing happened when she gave me that gift. I felt bad. I felt bad. And you know what? I felt good that I felt bad. Because at least I felt something. But I was stuck. I didn't know how to get out of this. I was stuck. I mean, I am a really good liar. Really good liar. And I spent most of my life lying and getting myself out of situations. I was finally in something I couldn't even begin to figure out how to lie my way out of this one, and I couldn't. And I got myself tied into so many spaghetti noodle knots and whatever. I couldn't even figure out where the end of the thing was in order to begin to try to untie knots. I was just stuck. Oh man, how am I going to get out of this? And so we went and we talked to the pastor, and the pastor was relatively new at pastoring. He was older, but he had been teaching elementary school for most of his life, and then he became a pastor, and so he had been dealing with these size issues, not these size issues. And so I went to him with a this size issue, and he was like, "Well, I'm not sure exactly, how to handle this one. But there's this other pastor couple, and they deal with this stuff all the time, and so I'll get advice from them, and then we'll have another appointment." And boy, he got some advice. He grilled me up one side and down the other side when I came back, and I was squirming in my chair. And and then he recommended some video series and workbooks and all this kind of stuff to start working through all these things and work through bitterness and work through this and that and the other thing, and it's something about marital intimacy. And I turned my wife, I'm like, "What do we need that for? We've got good marital intimacy." You laugh. Rightfully so. But I couldn't see it. I thought we had good marital intimacy. Right? I couldn't see it. I'm like, "What do we need this for?" She's like, "Honey, what's the definition of insanity?" And doing the same thing and expecting different results. This is something else. Let's do it. Like, "Oh, but it's so expensive. Nobody should ever charge this much for DVDs and a workbook. It's like highway robbery. I don't want to do." Oh, but she convinced me, and we got it. And by the time I got home from work, when those things came, she had already digested 2 of them. And she's like, "Honey, this is good." And I was like, it's a long day of work, and I sat down, and it was this preacher, and he was monotone, he was soft-spoken, and he was slow, and he was methodical, and I was asleep before anything. You know? And so I didn't get much out of it that time. I had to go back and watch it again. But the thing that hit me was not so much what he was saying, there were testimonies. There were testimonies of other couples that had been through things that were similar to what my wife and I were facing, and they were talking about how they had come through it, and they had, you know, things were resolved, and their marriage was even better than what it was before, and, you know, and all this kind of stuff. And that gave me a little measure of hope.
Right.
Maybe it's not too late for me.
Right.
Maybe it's not too late for me. And so that began the big argument with God. God saying, Mark, get into the wheelbarrow. And me coming back at God and saying, I don't know if I can trust you. I don't know if I can trust you. Well, he says, come now, let us reason together. Right? So he came back at me with, so how's it going with you in control?
Yeah.
How's your wheelbarrow?
Yes. Thank you very much for pointing that out. I hate myself. I fail at everything that I do. I hurt everyone that I love. My life is miserable, and it's horrible. Why don't you just give me a chance? Why don't you just give me a chance? But what does that mean? What does that look like? What is it going to, what are you going to ask me to do? What are you going to ask me to give up? Where are you going to ask me to go? What am I going to have to face? What does that look like? God, I have been like this for so long that if you change me, I don't know if I would know who I am. If I met myself and you changed me and I met myself on the street, I won't even know if I would recognize me. That was frightening. Because I didn't know me without all of these struggles. And if I was free from these struggles,
You have to re-know you.
what would I be? Right? There was a whole identity crisis going on, just with that whole idea of surrendering. And what are you going to ask me to do? And what am I going to have to give up? What am I going to lose?
Sounds like the argument for salvation.
Yes. Yeah, sounds like the argument for salvation for people. Yeah, absolutely, because he was trying to save me, and I was like, because this is familiar. And yeah, you say it's good that you're calling me to, but I don't know. I don't know. So I started working through the bitterness chapter in this workbook, and you're supposed to pray through this stuff from the heart and so on about what somebody said and did and how it made you feel and other things of that nature. And every time I tried to, this wall would just go up. And I couldn't get to it. I knew I was doing an intellectual exercise, and it wouldn't work as an intellectual exercise. It had to be something from the heart. And I couldn't get to the heart. How do you get to the heart when you can't get to the heart? I don't know. God, this is so frustrating. So frustrating. How does this work? I don't know how to go free. It's like, hello, I've got 1,000 ways to set you free. And I only need one. But for any of those 1,000 ways, I need you in the wheelbarrow. I need you in the wheelbarrow. Because that's the only way I can set you free. What does that mean? The question is, what are you not willing to do? What are you not willing to give up? Where are you not willing to face? Where are you not willing to go? What's on your not list? That's really the question. What's on your not list? If you come to God and you say, okay, you can take this, that, and that, but not that.
Or that.
That's right, or that. If you have even one thing on the not list, no, Lord, you can have all this, but you can not have that.
You got one leg out of the wheelbarrow.
That's right. Then you are not getting into the wheelbarrow. You will only get into the wheelbarrow if everything is off your not list. Everything off your not list. Because in the wheelbarrow, it's complete surrender. It's not partial surrender. It's not mostly surrender. It's not little surrender. It's complete surrender. You put yourself entirely into His will. And so I was having trouble. I wasn't getting very far, and so my wife advised me to call the author of this series and talk to them about the difficulties that I was having, and so on. And so I actually did get an appointment to do so on a day that I actually had off, so that I could actually do so, and got in contact with this guy. And so, he told me, well, your problem, don't worry about the bitterness chapter. You go over to the moral failure chapter, and you go work on that one. And you work through that whole, workbook, and you pray through, you ask the Lord to remind you of every time that you've done this and that and the other thing, and you've participated in this and so on and so forth, and you pray through each and every one of those things, and then take your list and read it to your wife.
Yeah, amen. Amen. Transparency.
What? Are you crazy?
We have a bad connection.
Yeah, I didn't hear that very well. What was that again? Read that to my... What? No. Bad idea. Really bad idea. We're only married because I lie. And if I tell her the truth, we are not going to be married anymore. That's what I believed. I believed.
Lies get you through.
That's right.
Yes, son, you're not lit. Not lit.
Not ready to give up.
It was on my no list. That's right. No, I'm not going to tell her everything. Because if I tell her everything, she's going to leave me. Because I believed a lie when I was younger, and that was, I hate myself. Now that was true. And if anyone loves and knows me as well as I know myself, they'll hate me like I hate myself.
Deception.
Yeah. And so, if you believe that, guess what? Nobody gets in. Nobody knows everything. You let somebody know this, you let somebody else know this, you might let somebody else know this, but nobody knows everything. There's always lies, there are always compartments, there's always secrets, there's always something. And I knew that the one that she married was a facade. And if she saw the real deal, that'd be it. Because that's not what she signed up for. And I hated myself. And I would have left myself had I had the option to leave myself, but I couldn't get out of myself, and so I was stuck.
With self.
That's right. And I knew that if anybody else could leave me, they would leave me because I was so despicable. That was it. And so now I'm faced with losing the one I treasure the most. Now, yes, I was planning on leaving her, but it's not because I didn't like her. It's just because I didn't want to drag her along in the darkness that I was planning on going into. She didn't deserve to go through all of that. But now I'm asked to do something that's going to make her go away in order for me to be free? No. Not willing to do that. So I had the day off that day. And I went down into the basement with the determination that I would do the first part. I'd write out the list. I'd pray through the things and all that kind of stuff. But I'm not resolved on that last part of going and telling her and being transparent. Now, I'm not recommending this to anyone. I'm just telling you my story. Right? Some people have taken the story and they've gone and they just went transparent with their spouse, and that was not a good idea. Right? In the moment and at the time. It needs to be with the Holy Spirit's leading and so on. I'm just telling you my story. Right? So I was down there in the basement, and the Holy Spirit was working hard on me. And I'm like, I am not doing this and losing her. And God was like, you're losing her anyway. You're losing her anyway. If you continue on the pathway of you being in control like you are wanting to be, you will lose her. But if you get into the wheelbarrow, you might not. It didn't say you won't. It said you might not. Yes, I want to be free. I want to be free. I'm dying for freedom. I'm going to die if I don't. But I'm not sure I can give up everything that's necessary in order to be free. And I can't tell you all the details of what happened that day, because some of them are still unclear to me. But something happened that day. And somehow God got through. And I realized that either I was going to lose it all and continue to be in control, or I was going to take the possibility of not losing it all and let Him be in control. And I made that choice. And the moment I made that choice, there was this tremendous desire within me to be free at whatever cost it took. Whatever cost it took. If I die in the process of going free, so be it. I have to be free.
Amen.
And I walked up those stairs, and I found my wife, and I brought her to the couch, and we sat down, and I took that list out, and I began to read it. And I got to the end of it, and her head was down, and she was shaking her head, and she said, I had no clue it was so bad. And I thought, yep, this is where she leaves me. You know, that sinking feeling that your whole world is just going to end. And then she said, but, no matter what, we're going to go through this together. And I broke. I just broke. And I just began to cry and cry and bawl and bawl and cry and cry. And I couldn't stop, and I was just shaking, crying and crying, and I just felt, oh, I hate myself, I hate myself, I hate myself, I hate myself, I hate myself. I fail at everything I do. I hurt everyone that I love. Oh God, why? How can you save somebody like me? I'm such a mess. Oh, I hate myself. And then after a while, it kind of let up a little bit, and then the next wave hit me, and I just felt all alone. Alone. And it was the beginning of God being able to get through those walls that I had around my heart to protect me from pain, but actually kept it in, and so on. And there was much more to come over time, but it was the very beginning of something new, of a new direction. And and with that initial transparency, then came continued transparency. And, when I remembered things, I'd tell my wife, I'd say, well, I forgot to tell you this because, I didn't think about it at the time. And, she was always worried about something really bad, really, really bad compared to what I had already really bad shared with her. And so on. And, But God began to then work things out. He began to mend her trust. He began to give me the self-control that I never had before. I began to start having victories where I had never had them before. And yes, it involved all of the same things that I had done before. Yes, I prayed and I read and I served. And well, guess what? Now God was beginning to give me His obedience, and I got into the wheelbarrow, and getting into the wheelbarrow, everything now began to work when before it didn't work. It didn't work before. I tried and I tried and I tried and I couldn't get out and I couldn't make it happen. But now when I surrendered, when I got into that wheelbarrow, when I was willing to face anything to be free at any cost, now everything that never worked before began to work now. And life began to change. There began victories coming in my life. Years later, I was talking with a friend and trying to help him through this scenario. And he asked me the question, how do I get into the wheelbarrow? I couldn't really answer the question at the time. I'm like, Lord, you got to teach me, show me, help me, And for 5 months I kept praying, Lord, help me to be able to make this easier so that the bar is lower, more people can get over it, you know, and so on. And 5 months later, he gave me the analogy in my prayer time in the morning. And this is it. Oh, you like it?
Been there.
Yeah. So imagine that you're in the complete darkness. Not a shred of light, nothing. You can't see your hand in front of your face, nothing. And you're hanging by a rope. Not here, but here, right? You're hanging by a rope. You don't know if there's anything around you. You don't know where you are in space. You don't know anything of that nature. And a voice comes to you and says, let go of the rope. Let go of the rope. Well, if you're anything like me, you're like, that's a stupid thought. Why would I let go of the rope? I mean, I don't even know what's down there. I'd probably die if I let go of the rope. No, I'm... And then it comes back later, let go of the rope. And it comes back later, let go of the rope. And it comes back later, let go of the rope. And eventually I'm like, God, is that you? Yeah. Let go of the rope. I got some questions. I said, like what's down there? No answer. Let's climb up and see where we can go. And there's some kind of solid ceiling, you can't get to it. All right, let's go the other way, investigate, and see where we can get. And hang on, nothing to grab. Oh, there's the end of the rope. Dangle as far as you can, dangle your toes. Oh, nothing. Okay, Tarzan swing, you know, get you swinging from side to side, see if you can stick your toes around something. Nothing. Call out, hey! No echo, no response, no nothing. You don't know if it's 2 inches, 2 feet, 20 feet, 2 miles, endless below you. And now God says, let go of the rope. Okay, God, is it 2 inches? No answer. Is it 2 feet? No answer. Is it 20 feet? No answer. Is it 2 miles? No answer. Just let go of the rope. If you're going to let go of the rope, you can only do so if you're willing to face whatever happens after you let go of the rope. Any possibility that might come. It might be a pokey landing, might be a soft landing, might be a hard one, might be a damaging one, it might be a deadly one. But you only let go of that rope if you're willing to face the possibilities of what might come and letting go. Now, surrender is not thinking about letting go. Surrender is not trying to let go. Surrender is simply letting go, right? And while we think that letting go is an action, it's not. Holding on is the action. Letting go is simply ceasing the action of holding on. The intellect can never make that decision. So if you're intellectual and you try to make all intellectual decisions, you'll never make that decision. Because the intellect will not handle uncertainty. The intellect will be like, okay, which finger first? If God condescended to tell you that, you'd say, okay, well, which joint of that finger first? And then you'd be like, okay, well, which muscle group of that finger first? And which nerve fibers for that finger? You know, you just bring it down to the irreducible thing. No. The only thing that makes that decision is faith, because faith always acts in the presence of uncertainty. Right? If there's certainty, it's not faith. Faith is always in the context of uncertainty. And so it's only faith that can let go of that because you have an uncertainty. Now, what is it that motivates you to let go? Either you trust the one who says let go, or
Trust yourself.
holding on becomes such a living hell
But you do it just out of tired.
that surely whatever's coming is not so bad compared to the hell that's here.
That's right.
Yeah. So why is it that so many of us have to get to the rock and a hard place spot where life is just such a hell before we surrender?
Yeah.
Because sometimes that's the only thing that will motivate us to go, okay, I'm not sure what's coming. I'm not sure what you're asking for, but this really is horrible, and I'm letting it go.
Then you think, why didn't I do it sooner?
I know.
What was it?
Yes. What was I thinking? I was just scared. I was just chicken little, you know. I wouldn't let go. So, what happens when you let go? You land in the wheelbarrow. That's right. You land in the wheelbarrow. The wheelbarrow is taking up your cross and following Christ.
And you go across.
That's right. He said to them, if anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. Is this a one-time event?
No, it's daily.
But it's always the hardest the first time. Because the first time, there's so much uncertainty with it. The next time, there's more certainty. And the next time, it gets easier and easier. It's easier and easier because you learn to trust the one who says, let go.
And the wheelbarrow keeps moving.
That's right. Now, there are some deceptions, and this is brief. I'm just going to cover this. There are deceptions in this. I have presented this from the perception of the deception because that's where we come to it from. But now I want to present it from the real standpoint. The real standpoint is this. When God calls you from the land to the tightrope, He is not calling you from safety to danger. He's calling you from danger to safety. Because He knows a landslide is coming and everybody left on the land will die. And the only ones that are safe are ones that get on the tightrope.
That's exactly right.
So He never calls us from safety to danger. He always calls us from danger to safety, but we look at it as dangerous because of our perspective. It's backwards. Right?
Because of unbelief.
And it's not a wheelbarrow where you're getting into and now you have a passive existence for the rest of your life. No. That's what we think when we're doing that. You know, now I have no more control. No, that's not it. What God does is He calls you onto the tightrope so that you can walk by His grace. And He gives you balance. And He gives you the motivation, and He gives you everything that's necessary in order for you to do so. But you're still free to choose. He preserves your freedom to choose. And what about that rope? That rope you hold on to is your idols, or are your idols. What you're not willing to let go of.
Yeah.
But what we don't recognize with that is that it is poisoned. And the more you hold on, the more it kills you. And He's asking you to let go because you're holding on to that which is destroying you so that He can save you. And He's not calling you to a free fall. He's right there, ready for you to hold His hand. But you can't hold His hand while you're holding on to the rope at the same time. And so He's always calling you from danger to safety, from evil to good, from bad to best. It just seems really hard because our perspective is wrong. And when you let go of the rope and you get into the wheelbarrow or you get on that tightrope, oh, praise the Lord, hallelujah! It's not that the struggle's over. But you start seeing victory and victory and victory after victory. Yes, you fall, just like a child that's learning to walk, right? It's the beginning of your Christian walk. Yes, you get up and you fall.
But
And
you
you
only
get up and you fall.
You only fall on the tightrope, you don't fall in the water.
That's right. Because it's not just a tightrope, it's a cross. And it's solid. Right? And yes, you get up and you fall, and you get up and you fall, and you get up and you stay up more, and you get up faster, and then you stand up longer, and then you fall less often, and you get to the point where you walk without falling.
And you're on the Canadian side.
That's right. Yeah, you're on the Canadian side. Isn't that awesome?
It's awesome.
Yes. The key to victory is complete surrender. When you have surrendered like that, then you can take the thoughts captive to the obedience of Christ. Because if you try to take them captive before,
You stay in the defeated land.
you stay in the land of defeat. It won't work. It only works after you surrender. Then it makes all the difference. And that's the key to victory. I'm going to avoid questions at this point since we are really late. I'm going to pray. And if you have any questions afterwards and want to stick around, that's fine. That's great. But I'm going to let the other people, go home and get your beauty rest. Let's pray. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for being such an awesome God. And that you have made ways to set us free. Set us free indeed. Oh, Lord. Maybe there are some that are here now that have, they're thinking, I need to get into that wheelbarrow. It's time to be free. It's time. Maybe there are objections, things that you've had on that not list, things that you've not been willing to let go of. And you realize it's time to let go of it, to be free. He won't harm you. He's there for your good. And while you don't know how it'll work out, he does. And he's got 1,000 ways to make it work. And if you now, eyes closed and heads bowed and so on, if you choose to let go and to let God set you free, and just raise your hand to heaven. Yes, Lord, that's me. Maybe I let go before. It's time to let go again. Maybe this is the first time. But thank you, Lord, for catching me and saving me and empowering me and setting me free in the land of victory. And this we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.